Quiet over there, high end.
Oh, we're live. It looks like on one
Oh.
page it looks like we're live, but let me see if it'll let me turn off our volume. It always gets like our jokes.
Top left, it says webinar is now streaming live.
Yeah, there we go. All right, we're all set. All right. All right, you guys, we're back with Coach's Conversation, another Coach's Conversation. Cafe. Basically, we are, man, we're plugging away on these Tuesdays right here. It seems like 1 o'clock every Tuesday. We've been pretty consistent with being able to come on and share what we've got for you guys. Today is an interesting topic. I think it will be useful as usual to all coaches out there, because we'll be talking about coaching difficult players and just, kind of going over and, what it is that we like to think about or what it is that we like to do as far as coaching difficult players. And again, what we do or what we've done doesn't make it the right thing or the wrong thing. It's just something to help get everybody's mind kind of turning around some possibilities of being able to coach up athletes and get them to the best position in life long term. And then I also think it's about us really benefiting you as coaches to get to the best possible spot that you can possibly be in. And so, I think you'll get those two out of this conversation. So I just want to welcome in our coaches after the holiday break. Thank you guys for coming in today. And let's just go ahead and get started with talking about coaching difficult players. The first thing I kind of want to start with is just like, what's kind of the first thought process as we talk about that. I mean, there's obviously maybe players that kind of come to our mind that we've had to battle through, but just individually, what's your first thought that comes to your mind whenever you think about coaching a difficult player? Does anybody want to take a stab at that? Kind of putting people on the spot here.
I'll take a stab at it. For me, what comes to mind right away is when I think of difficult players. I think difficult players to me are the players that maybe go against my personality or my, maybe they're a little bit like me, or, and I want things a certain way, and my personality is a little type A, and I think sometimes I have to reflect and say, hey, maybe it's not really them as it is me. So I've got to look at myself. But when I think of difficult players, those are usually the ones that, maybe don't want to follow the system that we have in place or the culture that we have set. And what I find most of the time through experience is, in my early years, I just wanted to, hey, hit the highway, buddy, or you do some running or some conditioning, some negative, reinforcement, which never seems to work. But as I got older and wiser, I think what I figured out was it was a challenge to me to find out, okay, what's causing this and what's at the root of it, and what can I do to find out more about that player and what motivates him. And so I think those are some of the avenues you got to go through.
All right.
I think also, very good point. Good to see everybody. I think on my end of it, just from my experience coaching, our young people, and really understanding that we gotta coach our players. It's like you gotta treat them all the same, but you gotta know your players, right? So one of the things that I've always done, even from the time that I started coaching at the lower levels, I spent time working with the players, interviewing the players, really just having a quick, 5 to 8 minute little conversation. This started way back when I was coaching the lower levels in Pop Warner youth football, and just being able to spend some time with the players. And you got to make time. You got to make time to lay out your clear expectations, right? So that way we create that consistency. But I spend time really talking to the players, but then also spending a little time coming over and meeting with the parents, meeting with their parents and or their guardian, and having a brief conversation with them and laying out my expectations early. I think by doing that early on, Isaac and coaches, it's really important for us to think about, how that's going to really set the culture that you want. Whether you're in the lower levels, whether you're middle school or high school, or even at the collegiate level, it's very important that you start off with having that conversation with the young athletes and their parents, but making that effort, make that as part of your coaching plan. Because without doing that, you're going to continue. You will have some issues that are going to arise, but when you include the parents in the process, it's going to make it that much easier.
Right. Yeah. So those are some useful points, I think, whenever we start thinking about, difficult players and what's going on in that. Yeah. What goes on in my mind too, I think it's definitely different than what used to be, where it used to be the thought was that, man, this player can't get it right. And now I am more of the avenue that maybe it's me sometimes, and that there's a possibility that it's either me or both, or that it's just not a good fit, but not that something's totally wrong with that player. And that idea in my mind kind of creates a different kind of avenue and approach for me, and I think you were speaking to that a little bit earlier, Coach Buckley, where, it gets you thinking on a different kind of line. And I think that's useful to our coaches listening. Like, if you guys understand that difficult players have a little bit to do with, or at least a little bit to do with who we are and what we're trying to implement, then it starts giving us an opportunity to be able to work with those players. All right. So, what are some pieces that we want to try to look at in order to help that player out? And so, a couple of things that I know that would be useful, I'll list, and then I'll kind of toss it to the coaches to see if there's any more that they have. But we talk about self-inspection, just being able to look over what it is that you have going on as a coach. But then also another thing that I think, as far as being able to work with a player is assessing what your culture needs. Like, what does my culture and my program actually need? Like, how I'm going to deal with this athlete's going to really change my culture somehow, or enforce my culture somehow, or something in between those two things. And so looking at what your culture needs, to me, is something that would be helpful in us being able to start to approach an athlete that's difficult to deal with. So for you three, what are maybe give me one or two things that you think is helpful to approaching a difficult player?
I think, like Adam said, it's very important that you sit down with that athlete and, try to find out what his goals are, as well as what your goals are for the program, that you can have some common ground to work with. And I think also, like Adam said, if there's a time to involve parents, where you kind of get, a little bit more background on the player, by maybe talking to the parents and knowing what's going on at home as well. But I think anytime that you can sit down with a player and just say, hey, what are you wanting to get out of this season? And this is what we're trying to portray as a team. And we've got to bring this together and develop a team unity thing. So I think that's one of the things you can do.
Right. Keith?
Yeah, great response, Coach. I like it a lot. I think we need to look at ourselves and ask ourselves with our player, what else is there, or is there anything different I can do to try to connect with that player or reach them? Maybe I'm not using all the tools that are at my disposal to reach this player. Maybe it's beyond me. I know one of our proud sponsors here, Reconnecting Youth Inc. is into social and emotional training. Do you have a facilitator or a trainer that's maybe on your campus that you can refer them to? Do you have a coach who might be in the public health realm that might be able to guide you, or that give you information that you could then use for that player, or refer that player to that coach? So sometimes we want to make sure we're using all the tools at our disposal, because we wear a lot of hats, and we try to do our best, but at the end of the day, we're not psychologists, we're not specialists with children, so to speak. We're teachers, or we're coaches, or both. So I think that might be an approach that's worthwhile.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Keith and Coach. You guys are really hitting it. I think for me, it's more of really laying out your expectations early at the very beginning. When I talk about doing a one-on-one interview with each player, I got to go back to my recent head coaching at the varsity level there, one of the local high schools. I started that interview process way before spring ball of the previous year, and began that interview process by sitting down, talking about grades and talking about goals and expectations on both ends. And we as coaches have to find that time to do that. It's not just coming out, getting the football and start throwing it and getting your offense set up. It's really about, I got to really know what kind of players I have here. And I'm really going to stick with that as much as I can, because the more that we can find that time to check in with our players and really sit down, have a heart-to-heart with those players through that interview process. In some cases, you have over 50 plus players on your team, or if you have less, that's even better. But make that as part of your coaching plan for the year, and it's gonna help you know your players much better. And then you're going to know exactly how to work with them academically, socially, and athletically. And I would really recommend that us as coaches continue to look at that, especially now. I was on last night. I was on a call, a Zoom call last night, Zoom conference with some players, some freshman level players, along with their coaches. And my hat's off to Mount Whitney Athletics for stepping up. And, again, I always want to thank our administration, but most importantly, taking a look at the coaches that stepped up and that are part of that Monday meeting, and just to hear the players respond to number one being, I asked the question, how is this class helping you on Monday nights? And a couple of players, one of the players came out and said, it's built my confidence. And so just by having a matter of 4 sessions into the program of CAST for today's student athletes, we're already starting to see a shift in just how they feel about themselves. Another one says, it's helping me get organized. And I love that. I mean, it's like, gosh, really, in four sessions, 4 hours of communication with their teammates, with a few other teammates and a couple of coaches on board, you can already see and feel the difference in how they're looking at things. And one says, I got to perform like the way I do on the field. I got to perform that same way in the classroom. Who says that as a freshman? Right. And so those are the kind of responses that we're getting. And I'm so proud of the work that's going on, but it really takes that type of approach where we're spending that time. And I'm not saying that all coaches have to do that. I'm requiring and requesting that they do that. Highly recommend. It's like if you do this, it's gonna create that culture that you're looking for. And number one, it's really establishing that relationship with your players.
Right. Yeah. So I feel like the kind of like what we would all agree with is being proactive is a huge aspect of us being able to help our player that's difficult for us to coach. If we get after it early on, that's going to create a lot of benefit for them. And I would agree with that. I want to throw something out there and just kind of get your guys' take on it as coaches with your experience and whether you would use it and how you would use it. I've mentioned this before in one of our podcasts or in some of our conversation, but I remember talking to a coach that I admire and him telling me look, Isaac, I think that the one thing that I like to establish is that I'm always fair, but I know I'm not equal. Right. And so this comes to my mind when we think about a difficult player, for the three of you, and it could be very different answers and different takes on that scenario, but how would you apply that, or how would you, I guess, leave it alone, or what would you do with that statement there? I can be fair always, but I also know I'm not equal. What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, for me, it just tells a story that, hey, we're going to all be treated the same way as far as the fairness in that, but every kid learns a little differently, and how I approach a kid is going to be different than how I approach somebody else. And I know, one of the things, and this might be one of your later questions, but I felt it always worked with difficult players was giving them some kind of responsibility, and have them be in a leadership role where they had to help design or build the culture out there, and giving them a role, whether it be as a captain or something else, where they feel like they're having some input into what's going on. That's always seemed to be helpful when I had certain players that I needed to get on board, having them be part of the process.
Right. And they're definitely, like, everybody can't have that one responsibility, right? And so
Right.
that's definitely not
Right.
not equal, right? But it's all, that's absolutely fair. All right.
Well, you just got to remember that as a coach, you need to be very active. Okay, those antennas have to come up, just like we say that the players or students' antennas are always up, those special antennas. Well, our antennas need to be up. Our awareness has to step up every single time we step on the field, or step on the court, or step in the swimming pool area, whatever it may be, wherever you're coaching. You need to know what's going on, and that's the role that we take on as a coach, right? I always put that back on myself, and I can guarantee you that I may not have all the answers, but I know that I have a coach or coaches that can assist, that are out there, working side by side with me, that we could figure it out together. And it's really just depending on who you're surrounding yourself with. But gosh, our antennas got to be up all the time. And those are those special antennas to know what's happening, what's going on with our players, and what are they experiencing throughout the day. And, one of the greatest feelings that you'll have as a coach, and it's that gratification, is when a player will come up to you and thank you. And that player, when it's not when you're on the field, it's when you see them out in public, when you see them at a movie theater, or you see them downtown, or wherever it may be. And when that player comes up and says hi to you, you know that you made an impact, or you had an impact. And so that's the real significant part of all this. I truly believe that. Yeah.
And Keith, what about for you? The idea of fair versus equal.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I love that phrase. It's a great phrase. I'm a coach. I want to be fair, but not equal. I think this is probably a good opportunity when we could talk about where old school meets new school, and knowing, in the old school being the old school type of tradition of knowing that there might be some players or positions that have a little higher value on your squad, not the person, but the position that has a little higher value than others. You might be able to replace an offensive lineman, but it's a little more difficult to replace your starting quarterback, let's say, right? If you're playing a tough opponent in baseball, you want your ace pitcher on the mound. You might treat his situation of being a difficult player a little different, because you need him on the mound for that particular game. Again, fair but not equal. So I think that speaks to that. And now you're going to go into a realm of really dealing with case by case situations. Okay, so now you have to look at does a consequence that you're going to somehow institute on this player fit his act, and you want to make sure that the consequence fits the act. You don't want to be overblown with any sort of penalty or action. If you're going to sit this player, is it the right time to sit this player? Or is that even the right action? Maybe as coaches need to, maybe you just do some leg club and some running. Okay. So again, case by case, I think it's going to be a good opportunity where some of the old guard meets some of the new conceptual stuff as far as coaching that you're going to be able to apply in that situation. So that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah. No, I like that. I think that it even takes us into probably the hardest part about this conversation. Like we're talking about the proactive things that might help, but yeah, when game day hits and the star player is in the scenario of being controversial or having a challenge time or just doing something that is part of the age group that wasn't supposed to happen, or that they would do differently if they had a different chance. Being young and making mistakes does exist. So that difficult player meets game day, is probably the hardest part of this, right? Like, because now it comes down to us having to make a decision that again could mess with our culture. It could mess with our who we are, our honor as coaches. It could do a lot of different things and go tumbling if our decision isn't sound, right? So that kind of brings us to the next idea that I wanted to be able to share about is communication with our staff and with that player. And Adam started alluding to it a little bit earlier, how important communication really is throughout, but specifically with the staff. Like, how do we use our staff around us to come to a decision on helping us with dealing with difficult players? How would you guys go about communicating with them, or how have you done that?
Well, I think if
Well,
I may,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Coach.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Adam.
No, I was just going to say along those lines is, setting those expectations with your coaches, making sure that your coaches, as part of your coaching meeting that you have before practice, that you're consistent every single time and have that as the topic of discussion, and being consistent in terms of what you're sharing. Again, every day is important. When you have your real quick coaches, all your coaches get together, have your meeting, and have that discussion. The challenge is, again, if you can prevent a student from having a situation on the field, and how you can prevent that is your relationship throughout the week, the relationship from the very beginning. Once you establish that relationship, that's going to prevent those blowups. I've seen it happen. I've been to games where I've seen at the high school level where I've seen players literally walk off the field. And to me, the first indication to me in my mind was that they haven't spent enough time together. When a player can walk off the field on a Friday night, who's your star player, I've seen it happen. And so how you can prevent that, how you could really, you may not prevent the whole thing, right? But you can establish that relationship throughout the week. That's why it's important to check in with your players, but your coaches all have to be on the same page, especially if they're on the field, because you're all together as one, as a coaching staff. And the more that you're together on the same page, each of you should be sharing that same message all the time, so that doesn't happen. I would always tell our coaches, hey, we're on the big stage. On a Friday night, we're on the big stage. This is not our stage. That stage is for the players and for the families. And our job is to help facilitate that. And how we would do that, again, is our job throughout the week is to continue to build a good rapport and a great relationship with our players, so that doesn't happen.
Right. Yeah, I like that. Communicate the expectation with the staff.
Yep.
Coach Buckley, did you have something?
Yeah, I think Adam's right on with that. You have to have expectations, and your coaches need to know what those are. But I think the other thing that I want to get across is, as the head coach, you make the final decision.
Yep.
And I think you have to be that as your head coach. You want to listen to everybody and you want input from all your guys. But I think as a head coach, you have to put in place, okay, when you have to make a discipline on a player, that's what I'm talking about. Like, if something happens where Are we going to play this player today or not play him? I think you have to look at all the information with the coaches, but then also you have to determine, is the discipline I'm going to put on this player, is it going to affect the team, or is this going to be for the player? And sometimes it's out of, it's out of your control, because it might be a school decision or admin decision. But there are a lot of times I've had to make decisions, and I always come back to, what are the expectations that I gave to parents and that I expected on this program?
Right.
And if I'm going to have integrity with that, I need to follow through with it. Doesn't matter if it's my starting pitcher, my starting quarterback, whatever. There are times when I've got to make the tough call.
Yep.
And it might not be in the best interest of the player right then, but it sets the precedence that this is what our program's about, and we will not tolerate certain things. And so sometimes I think you have to have the clear expectations, and you have to put it out there. Now, if you've not done that with parents and your players, then it's a little tougher to make that call.
Right.
But when you have to make, and I've had to make those calls, some tough calls, and got a lot of heat, but in the end, people thanked me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, difficult decisions.
Very difficult. And I feel like that's where that delayed gratification comes in on our part, but also it helps that athlete to develop a sense of delayed gratification, because they understand, even though this situation is hard right now, at some point in time in life, these scenarios will stack up, and you either change or you won't. But most likely you're going to change and start learning from all of these hard scenarios that you've accidentally created. Did you have any follow-up
You're
on that?
exactly right.
Yeah. Let me take that question from a little bit slightly different angle, since we've already really hit some great topics as far as being a head coach. Let's talk about maybe being an assistant coach or a coordinator. I've worn both hats. I've been a position coach, coordinator, and head coach. So let's talk about being a head coach and how do you do that? Because that's where it gets, or an assistant coach, and that's where it gets difficult, because you're not the guy in charge. You're not the guy making that final determination, as Coach alluded to, but you still got to exist, and you got to deal with players and your fellow staff. So I would say it's important as part of the assistant staff, not the head coach, that you maintain unity. You maintain unity. You maintain the vision and the loyalty to your head coach that he's envisioned. Okay, and that sometimes requires swallowing your pride, or taking an approach that maybe you want to take, but the head coach is taking a different approach. So I think you got to have that unity, that loyalty to that head coach. And if you see other or hear or feel maybe something kind of going astray with some other components of the staff, other coaches, I think as a coordinator and assistant, you can talk to the other assistants and say, hey, what's going on here? Is this something that rises to the level that we should come together and speak to the head coach about? And so to ensure that we're all on the same page, because after all, we're all in this together. All of us have to be rowing in the same direction, and the head coach is providing that vision. So if we start to go astray, we better get back and rowing together real quick here, or things can go south.
Yeah, very admirable. I love that you bring that up. I think so. I've been in situations,
Yeah.
That's actually my current position right now. And one of the things that I feel like is useful is there can't be any splitting. As coaches, we're all on the same page with the same goal. Even if my head coach is to assign me to a player, or in the past I've been assigned to different players, like it doesn't that player doesn't become my player, right? Those players are our players, and we're all together and making decisions that benefit the culture first, and then the team, and then finally, to make sure that player is safe and taken care of. So it's a big deal to not get split as a staff, and so I love that you would bring that up too. All right, so I kind of want to just close on this situation here, is maybe if we can think of one reactive way. So the player's already kind of is disruptive. Maybe you haven't put all the things in place that you should have. Um, and you're trying to recall, like, man, I was listening to Coach's Conversation Cafe the other day, and I have this player now, and where should what should I do now, right? In this moment. I'm gonna start off by giving one, and then I'm gonna come to you guys. Keith, I'll go to you first on this. But the one that I would say to coaches, if you're already in a situation, and it's difficult, you have a disruptive athlete, is really going to them and asking them for how they want to agree to be held accountable, I think is a really useful thing. And what that does is it gives them a sense of control over what's going on with them. So it's not going to be a if then. Like, I think it's very unuseful to go, or very not it's not useful to go to them and say, if you do this, then this will happen, right? It's more about, hey, look, this is what we have going on in the program. This is what we do in this program. How would you like me to hold you accountable? Or a better question is probably, what can we agree to doing to hold you accountable to meet this standard, right? I like asking the question to athletes that aren't to where they need to be. I like asking them if they want to be great or not, right? Because if you want to be great, or if you want to go after a certain kind of level, there's some kind of expectation that I'm going to have from you, right? If I'm going to help you to do that, then there's something that I'm going to have to be able to hold you accountable for. And so we talk about that and have that discussion. And I think the player starts to understand that, man, this person's in my corner. They want me to be great. That's what this standard's about. And there's that sense of autonomy that's built because they're coming up with it. Coach, I do want you to call me on anytime I slip up, or I want to be able to come back in the meeting and have another conversation, or whatever those scenarios are. Those things can really be set out in a conversation that asks them about the standard, or how they want to be held accountable for a standard that is part of your program. So that's my way of giving to our coaches. That's one way. What about you?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to work with a player in that. I know in my sport, a lot of times it has to do with just an emotion. It's an emotion where a kid will blow up. In basketball, Isaac, how intense basketball gets, and all of a sudden the kid blows up. In baseball, you have a kid that, big situation, umpire calls a close strike three on him, and he blows up at the umpire or whatever. In my sport, it's a little bit easier because, well, I in basketball too, but I can pull the kid out of the game, sit him down, and have that conversation like we were talking about, that, hey, I need you to settle down because we need you in this game, but I'm going to wait until you gather yourself. Do you understand? You're losing it out there. You're letting your emotions get you, and you won't be able to go on and play. A pitcher too, the same situation. And so I can pull them out sometimes, get them relaxed, talk to them, ensure them that I'm for them, but their behavior I'm not for. And we got to get that under control for the betterment of the team, and then I can put them back out. So that's some things that have worked well for me. But in some sports, that's not, you're not able to do that. Or if it's so out of hand, sometimes you just got to pull.
Okay. Keith or Adam?
Yeah, I think this is another situation where I think experience is priceless, because you hear from Coach Buckley with all those years. He can take so many scenarios and deal with them differently. And again, I've touched on this. A lot of things are case by case. There's going to be times when letting your player know that you having genuine interest in him or her and their success or their role is gonna win the day. Other times, a little more stringent path might be necessary. maybe a lake club running, maybe missing out on some playing time. So again, when you go case by case, I really think that's probably the best scenario. And you're going to have to use, again, all the tools on your tool belt that you have. If you're a first year coach, or you're a 30-year coach, and obviously as you go along, you're going to have more tools on that belt to draw from. But you're not alone, as we pointed out. You're going to have some folks around you in your community that you might be able to draw upon, ask, pick their brain, and that's how you get by, and that's how you get that experience. But again, everything is as life, and you're going to have to take it case by case, and go with that approach. I think.
Right.
Yeah, really good, Keith. Yeah, I like that. That's exactly right. I would say this to Isaac. I think for me, in my years of coaching and being around coaches for many, many years, the best way to handle any situation is to isolate, right? We want to isolate the situation the best that we can with the player that's having a tough time. Make sure we pull that player aside and we have that conversation. The last thing we want to do is embarrass the individual in front of their peers. And that's a really important part, because sometimes as a coach, we're going to fly off the handle, whatever, could be upset about something, could be whatever it may be. Keep in mind that you have a young person that's looking up to you, and how you respond is very important. And so again, when I talk about expectations, those expectations, they don't start just at the beginning of practice. They start at the beginning of the season. And having those one-on-one meetings, and you as a head coach or an assistant coach laying out those expectations. Because when those expectations are out there, they're going to trust that when you isolate them and have that one-on-one conversation, that's gonna make everything better. It may not be better for that situation that's happening, but it's going to create a stronger relationship because you did not embarrass them in front of their peers. So that's one part that I always reflect on, and how important that is. So know your situation. The last thing you want to do is embarrass a player on the field in front of all their peers and all their family members. So, you as a head coach, you as an assistant coach, if that's one of your players at the position that you coach, you walk on over and have a conversation.
All right, you guys. So basically you have a lot of information. Luckily, it's up on YouTube. You guys are able to rewind that back and be able to see any information that you can pull down to get it and use it. Appreciate you coaches being in today with me, and then also for everybody watching, appreciate you guys, your views, and share as well, please, because there are coaches out there that need this information, that can use it. And I guess if we want to go even bigger, there's athletes out there that can use it as well. And so, yeah, please share. And we'll see you guys next week. Coaches Conversation Cafe at 1:00. Take care.
Have a great day. Thanks.